Today on Mr. Mastered, we're talking with Harlem's own Terrell Jones, aka Terrellish. He took DJ Khaled and Fat Joe and made them into fashion icons. 20 years in, Terrell dresses stars and is putting hip-hop style into luxury fashion. This is Mr. Mastered with Terrell Jones. Welcome to Mixed and Mastered, the podcast where the stories of the music industry come to life. I'm Jeffrey Sledge, bringing you real conversations with the people who have shaped the sound of music. We're pulling back the curtain on what it takes to make it in the music business. These are the stories you won't hear anywhere else, told by the people who live them. This is Mixed and Mastered. Hello, Mixed and Mastered with a master stylist, Terrell Jones, Harlem's own. What's up, Rel?
What's up, man? How you doing?
I'm good. You want me to call you Rel, Relish, Terrell? What do you like best?
Work. Everyone knows me as a all. You know, some people call me Relish, some people call me Terrell. Relly, it all works.
Rel. So
yes.
with Mr. Master, what I've been doing is talking to, I think I explained to you, talking to music executives. As of now, everybody I've talked to has worked in a label in some capacity. I've talked to my friend Nicole, who was the head of Geffen Records. I talked to Sean C, who you know from Harlem, who's worked as an A&R person, and on and on and on. Whitney Gail Benter, who worked at several labels too. But I also want to do this show to show all facets of the music industry. So I know one of the things now, which has really gotten popular, in my opinion, you might correct me if I'm wrong, over the past few years, is more and more kids have gotten deeper into fashion, and more kids are wanting to be stylists. And yes. I don't even know the path to get to that. But you are a stylist. You've been a stylist for many, many years. You've styled some of the biggest names in the industry. So I wanted to talk to you because I wanted you to tell your story, number one, and it's kind of, maybe in telling your story, kids will kind of catch some jewels on how to maybe pursue their dream.
Yeah, so I definitely want to share my story, but I feel like my story is one that no longer exists anymore because obviously I've been in this for 25 years. So 25 years ago, the way that you actually had entree to the music industry or to the fashion industry was totally different than what it is today because this was pre-social media.
Absolutely.
I know my story, but today I think that I just think it's a completely different ball game. But my story is actually
let's start from the beginning. No, we're gonna start from the very beginning.
Okay.
You're born and raised in Harlem, New York. Correct?
Born and raised. Yes, I'm born and raised in Harlem.
So tell me about growing up in Harlem. Just as Terrell the kid.
Harlem, growing up, born and raised in Harlem, to me is like the mecca of fashion. So as most people in the Gucci days were just being introduced, I mean, when I'm talking about around the globe, were being introduced to Dapper Dan. That was someone who was making like my Easter clothes, my graduation clothes growing up as a kid. So I have clothes from Dap, probably dating back to like 5 years old, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow. So you got some classic material.
So I have classic materials. And I mean, this is before you were doing like Gucci and Louis Vuitton and Fendi and MCM. Dap actually used to do custom suits for myself. I'm a twin. So for myself and my brother. So that was something that I grew up with. Growing up in Harlem, obviously, I feel like that's like the mecca or the capital of fashion. Because different layers and levels of fashion. Yeah. So I can just take you through like a weekend in Harlem. So Fridays, Saturdays, obviously you had the flyest people come out, meaning dressed in the best designers, the furs, the leathers, the cars. I mean, it was a complete lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And then you I grew up, my grandmother was in the block of Abyssinia, which is a famous church in Harlem, for those who don't know. For me, that was where I was actually able to also further my connection with fashion because you saw people getting dressed up for church. This is when people got dressed for church. When I say from head to toe, I mean from head to toe. So women had on gloves, they wore hats, they wore amazing hosiery, they wore beautiful dresses, they wore fur coats. My grandmother and my great-grandmother were one of those women. So that was when you were really able to see who actually had style, who actually exuded a certain level of style. It was that transition, that turning point for me, which to me was my introduction to sort of kind of high fashion style. I mean,
Okay.
Leon Talley, everyone knows the great Andre Leon Talley,
Yes,
rest in
of
peace.
course, of course, of course.
He was a member of
Yeah,
Abyssinian.
I used to see him in the morning. I used to see him in the morning sometime on 145th.
Yeah,
I'd be out like getting breakfast or whatever Sunday morning. I'd see him driving. He had like a Benz. Yeah, I'd see him driving down 45th going to Abyssinian. I've seen him several
yeah.
times in Harlem. Mm-hmm.
So that speaks for itself as to where what I was able to receive, the gift that I was able to receive just from being born and raised in Harlem and being connected to the church community and what church had to offer style and high fashion and luxury for our community.
Know what else was high fashion, but more streetwear that I don't think they do anymore. And I know you remember this. You remember Easter? People would go to Times Square. Everybody
Yes.
would put on like their leather suits or they whatever they fly. And Easter Sunday evenings at Times Square would be like this gathering of like kids and everybody from all boroughs, because obviously Times Square is the midpoint where you can get to
Yeah.
any there from any borough. And all these kids would just be walking around 42nd Street and going taking the pictures with the that you bought in the little folder thing and all that. I remember
Well,
that too.
that was our runway back then.
Yes.
So in my generation, we did Times Square, but then we also had the car show at Jacob Javits Convention Center. So that was one place that you had gone. You actually had 125th Street where all the street vendors were out. And so you went there. If you were going to like a movie theater or something like that, you went to carnivals. But what was most important, like you said about Easter Sunday, was your after church outfit. That's
Mm-hmm.
to put on your great leather jacket. That's when you were able to put on your amazing denim suit. That's when you were able to get off your great, whatever the footwear of the time was, whether they were Jordans or Patrick Ewings or Diodoras, whatever it was, that was your moment to shine. So
Valleys.
to me, that was the original, and one day that was Fashion Week.
Yes, yeah,
And,
exactly. So
and then,
I find it interesting that so I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things. So we know, as you discussed, the Black church is very influential in fashion, and we obviously we just talked about Times Square and Jacob Javits and all that. But another thing that was influential in fashion, the price is still now, is high school.
high school,
So
yes.
tell me about your high school experiences in fashion, and tell me about that as well.
Well, I have to bring you back to before I even got to high school
Okay.
because my family, we grew up, my parents put us in Catholic school.
Okay.
So I only made it to fourth grade in this particular school when my brother and my sister, they continued and went on. But I only made it to fourth grade. And my mom asked me, what's going on? Why don't you want to attend Catholic school anymore? And I said to her, and thank God for my mother for listening to me. I said to her, I no longer want to wear the same clothes every day. And she said to me, Terrell, school is not a fashion show. So that's not a good enough reason. But when the school year was actually when it was time to go back, she actually did not enroll me, and she allowed me to go to public school, which is where I was actually able to discover my own sense of style
Express
because it didn't
yourself.
my spirit nor my personality to be in a classroom of 32 people dressed just alike. I was probably 9 years old. At 9 years old, I knew that just didn't feel good to me, and that I needed to dig deeper within myself. And obviously, at that moment, now I'm able to say, as a grown man at 46 years old, I just needed to find my identity. But it was just very early that I knew that I had my own identity. It was just
So,
a matter of discovering it and discovering it through style and through fashion.
so was that kind of at the point where you realized? I mean, you're nine, so you don't really know, but
Yeah.
it's like kind of like this is what I kind of want to do, but I don't really know what it is. But you have a passion. Did you start to get a passion for fashion?
Yes, I had a passion for fashion, obviously, because, like my mother said, school had become my fashion show. And that was my way that was the language that I spoke. So that was my way to communicate. That was the way that I expressed myself. So it was all through fashion. And that was when I was in fifth grade that I realized this is who Terrell is, or this is who Terrell is becoming. And this is one layer of me. But this is the layer that I'm choosing right now that will be my form of communication, the language that I would speak for the rest of my life. And it was fashion. And I definitely knew that at 5 years old. I didn't know it would be a career path for me, but I definitely knew that it was a part of me that was dying to be brought to life.
So take me to let's move up a few years. Take me to how you because I read you were working at Ice you were VP at Iceberg.
Yes.
Tell me how you got into. For those who don't know, Iceberg is I think they're still around. It was a clothing
Yes.
line that was a very popular in the '90s to the 2000s. I guess it was a very popular clothing line. And I want to know how you got to that point.
That was also an interesting time for me. So Iceberg, I got there because a dear friend of mine who was also a fashion person told me there's a job opening, and it was either Women's Wear Daily or DNA, and they're looking for receptionist. And I was like, oh, I'm open to. I just want to work in a showroom. I would love to just work in a fashion house.
Of
So
course,
I'll take a position as a receptionist
of
in
course.
this showroom. I've gone. So obviously, this is out of a newspaper. This is out of a fashion paper back then. So that sort of kind of unheard of today. That's how you get your job. So I apply and I get a call and I go in for the interview. The interview was very special in itself because as soon as I got to the interview, they probably asked me 2 or 3 questions. And I'll never forget, I wore Burberry to this interview. They never said what fashion house or anything. They actually used the umbrella of the house. So they never said that it was the Iceberg label, but sort of kind of just like the head of the house. So you don't know you don't really know what you're interviewing for. They gave me an outfit and said, I know this is strange, but would you mind trying this on for us? And I'm like, sure. So I go into the bathroom and I change and I try on this outfit for him. And I come out and she says, I'm so sorry. I know this is you're probably thinking I'm a crazy person, but can you walk in that other room and just show it to some people in there? And I'm just like, okay. I go in and I walk and I show them the outfit. And the people look and they nod their head and they're like, "Oh, that's amazing." And she says, "Okay." Then I go back in the interview room and then she said, "Would you do me another favor?" I said, "Yeah, what is it?" She said, "Would you try on something else for me?" And I said,
Really?
"Yes." I said, "What do you want me to try on?" She said, "Just look at that rack. Anything you want, just do it your way." So I go and I grab some stuff really quickly and I go in the bathroom and I change and I throw a sweater over my shoulder. And she says, "Will you also go in there and show it to those gentlemen sitting at the table?" And I go and I show it to them and that's it. And then she says, "You've been amazing. Thank you so much. Interview's over." By the time I get home at that point in life, you had an answering machine. I had a voice message saying, "We'd love to meet you again. Can you come back tomorrow?" And I'm like, sure, that's fine. I go back tomorrow and she says, "Well, so I want to offer you a position, but I want to offer you a very weird position." And I said, "Okay." She said, "So I want you to be the receptionist part time, but I also want to know if you could be a fit model for me because what you did in the interview was you sold some clothing. Not only did you sell the clothing, those were buyers from very important stores." And I'm like, okay. She said, "So they brought what you sold, which was canceled out of the collection, but they also said that we need to have you as the fit model because you actually brought the clothes to life." And that was my
Wow.
actually got in the Iceberg family. And then it sort of kind of took off from there. So I never actually really was able to become the receptionist. They structured everything around me. A receptionist normally sat at a desk and answered the phone. I never
Hmm.
had a desk. They brought a cordless phone for me, and they were like, "Answer the phone when you can." But we're back to back in appointments, and it's buying season, and we just want you to model. And yeah, we just want you to model. And I'm like, okay, fine. And then from there, they were going to a convention called Magic in Las Vegas. And the president of the company said, "So my sales ladies told me that they'll quit if they can't bring you to Magic with them." And I'm like, huh? And he's like, "Yeah, so can you go to Las Vegas?" And I'm like, "I guess so." He's like, "Whatever you need. I will pay you extra, whatever you need." But they said that they will not want to go if you can't go with them. And that's how it all began.
Yeah, that is an amazing story. Now, how old are you at this time?
At this time, I'm probably maybe about 23.
Wow.
23.
Now, and that was your entree into like I guess the corporate air quote side of fashion.
Yeah, that was my entree. And the same person who actually told me about the job was a young lady I had gone to school with. I lived a very crazy life. I went to performing arts high school, so I was a dance major. So I thought that I was 1,000% sure that I was going to grow up and become a professional dancer. And there was this woman, and she had the most amazing style, and she was about a year or two ahead of me. And she like graduated, and when she graduated, I didn't see her anymore. And then one day she came back around, and she just had the most amazing style, and she was the most beautiful girl that you've ever seen. She said to me, "You have such great style. You should like help me out one day. My boyfriend's a singer." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, whatever." And thing of her, and next thing you know, she her boyfriend was at the time. I want to make sure I have it right. Her boyfriend was JoJo of Jodeci. He had done a music video. She wound up coming out. I saw her like running to the store, and she had on a Jodeci jacket. Like when they did airbrushing, and his face was in the back. And I'm like, holy shit, this is really her boyfriend. And time went by, and then she said to me, and then one day I was in the elevator. No, no, no. She said to me one day, "You should come to my house and visit me. I'm actually working, and I'm dressing someone, and I could really use your help." And I said, "Okay, cool." So I go to her house and I meet her, and the person that she's dressing that she needs my help with happens to be Mary J. Blige. And that's where it all went. That's how it all began.
Now, are you still at Iceberg at this time, or is this before or after, or is it kind of simultaneous?
No, I'm actually, this is, to be honest with you, this is actually right before I actually got to Iceberg. Then she tells me about the paper. So I help her once or twice with Mary. Then she tells me about the position. I go and get this job at Iceberg. Then she comes back for me, but I have a job, and I go and I just go work and help her with Mary J. Blige.
Wow,
And Iceberg
wow.
generous to me. So what I did at that time was, remember, I'm a fit model at Iceberg. I don't have like a position. So
Yeah.
season had ended, selling season, buying season had ended. And so I said to them, "So what's next?" And they said to me, "What do you want to do next?" And I said, "Oh, I would love to like work in PR." The president of the company said, "So you should just assist the girl in PR office." I go and I assist her. I call my friend who works with Mary, and Mary has something really big coming up. And I said, "You should let us dress her." We dressed Mary for the VMAs that year. And my boss was so excited. He said, "I need you to go to Milan because the owners of the company want to know who got Mary J. Blige to wear these clothes. So you should actually go to the runway show in September." And when I got there, he offered me a position as the head of PR and celebrity wardrobing for the brand. So again, I was no longer, but that was bad. It was a gift and a curse because then I was no longer going to be able to be the fit model for the sales team. So the sales team, but the public relations department was,
Was
you know,
loving you.
great.
So, Mary, you put Mary in a whole Iceberg fit for that.
Put her in an
You know,
Iceberg fit, and then it was just it was just divine timing. At that time, Little Kim was going on tour with, I want to say maybe with Cisco, and I'd gotten in touch with Hillary, and Hillary and I we had become very
Hillary,
fast
what?
friends. Hillary Weston was actually Little Kim's manager at that time, and she said to me, "You should design our tour clothes. Like you should design our tour jackets." And I said, "Oh, we should definitely do them." I said, "But I don't want to do traditional tour jackets. I want them to be a little bit more Little Kim." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Like we'd like them in leather, and maybe like we can like stud out the Queen Bee logo on the back." I work with Italy. We design these jackets. Kim loves this jacket. She wears this jacket. Iceberg loves that Kim's in the jacket. So that leads to Little Kim having an Iceberg campaign, all because I was like, Kim is the
You.
girl dress.
So, at this point, do you even know you're actually being a stylist, or you just doing your thing? Like, just kind of like it's just like, being a stylist? Or you just like, yo, I'm working with Iceberg and I'm hooking my peoples up, and of course I'm being compensated. But are you being a stylist? I say that because
No, I don't know.
when I started in the music business, I tell people like when my first job, I got the job, God bless, and the owner of that label, his name is Stu Fine. He gave me this binder, and he said, "Call all these people every week." So I was calling, record stores and, magazines and radio stations because it was just a binder full of jumbled stuff. So I'm saying all that to say I didn't know really that I was being a promotion person and an A&R person and publicist. I was just calling people. So, and I wanted to know if it was like that with you, where you just kind of, I'm in fashion, so I wanted to do something, just doing my thing, or did you realize you were actually styling people?
No, I didn't realize it. I realized I was having the time of my life, and I realized that didn't have a job, that I actually got up to do something that I love every day. And anything that I actually felt like connected with the brand or connected with my spirit, I would actually pick up the phone and sort of kind of make it happen. So at that time, there was a huge show called 106 in Park, and it
Mm-hmm.
came on every day.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, "I like this show. I watched this show. I should dress them." I get in touch with their stylist. She puts the clothes on him. Obviously, it makes great publicity. And I'm like, that's really cool. And then there was someone who was wearing Iceberg at the time who I never met. I heard of about him, but I had never met him. And it just so happens to be Trick Daddy. Trick Daddy's coming to New York to do 106 and Park with Trina, and they're looking for something to wear. So one of your people, Joy Brown, actually says, I don't know, I forget how we connect, but Joy gets in touch with me. I'm like, sure, send them over. I'd love to dress them. They literally showed up at my door, Trick Daddy and Trina alone, no security. I dressed them. I send them on their way to do a taping of 106 and Park. They do it. Joy calls me the next day and says, that was amazing. I have a job for you. Are you interested? And I said, yeah, sure. I
Why
said, but I
not?
have a I said, I actually have a job. I work here. Like, this is my job. She said, but I have a job for you. You're like a stylist too, right? And I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, because I have an artist who's coming from Jamaica. And this in the most respectful way, but we want him to look a little bit more Americanized. Okay. Do you think you can do that? And I said, absolutely. Fast forward is Sean Paul, and I work at Iceberg, style Sean Paul, a lot of it in Iceberg, and everything just worked.
So Iceberg is this. You're the golden child of Iceberg.
I'm a golden child at Iceberg.
So how long did you work at Iceberg? How
I
many years?
stayed for about 6 or 7 years.
So you were for a while.
6 or 7 years, and obviously times had changed, and they when they called it urban fashion, that was sort of kind of taking a dip, and the Sean Johns, we were the only ones that were actually produced out of Italy. Everyone else was sort of kind of on the American side of so they had layoffs, and I was actually one of the people in the layoffs. And at that moment, I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? I mean, do I go work for Sean John? Do I go work for Fat Farm? Do I go work for Rockaware? And a friend of both of ours, Bevy Smith, says, no, you don't have a job. You work for yourself. And I'm like, that's impossible. And she literally takes me to 57th Street to Bergdorf, and we go. No, actually, it was Barney's. I'm sorry. We go and we got business cards made. Of course, they have to be made in Barney's. And that's when I realized I was a stylist. When she took me and brought me a home fax machine, and I got a laptop and a desk for my home office and business cards. And she said, this is your new life. And that's I was a stylist after all the styling I had done. I mean, I was with everyone. I was with Tweet. I'd been with Mary J. Blige. I'd been with Sean Paul. I'd done everything that you could think of. I'd done tons of editorial, but it wasn't until that moment when that door closed that I realized, I guess I am a stylist.
Yeah. Wow. So when you started your styling business, who was your first client?
When I started my styling business, who was my first client? I would have to say probably Fat Joe.
Okay. And how did that come together? Because I know you guys still work together now.
Yeah, that came together through his wife. We met through a mutual friend, his wife and I. Actually, the same woman that actually brought me on for Mary. She's still my friend, and she introduced me to his wife one day. She said, "His wife, I have Fat Joe's wife, and she's looking for an outfit, and I know you'll be perfect. You know exactly what to do." And so I met her in Soho, and I took her shopping. We did it. It was done. And then she said, "You were really fun. Are you busy tomorrow?" And I'm like, "No." She said, "Oh, okay, I have a husband. And he's a big guy. Maybe one day you can dress him." She actually picks me up the next day. We go and we hang out. She said, "Do you know how to dress big guys?" I said, "Yeah." She says, "Okay, well, my husband's Fat Joe." And
you didn't even know Joe was her husband.
I didn't put two together. No, I didn't really put the two together. I just knew she was really lovely. And we're still together. We just went over something today. So that's about 20 years later.
So tell me about, I have so many questions. I'm trying to also, okay, first of all, tell me about styling Joe, because he was much heavier at that point than he is now. How was that hard to do? Did you have to do a lot of custom stuff, or?
I did a lot of custom. Joe was very interesting for me because he had such a relationship with style. I was very used to introducing people to new things, and the clients that I obviously had dealt with then, they had a sense of style, but it was just easier. We also had the challenge of size. And so the limitations. So I had tons of limitations with Joe at that particular time, but he had such a relationship with style that it was it made up for it. So
Mm.
at that particular time, my very first job with him was a video with J Lo, and we shot.
Oh,
And J Lo was she was J Lo. She still is J Lo, but she
but yeah,
was
that's when she first
J Lo.
blew up, like blew up. Yeah.
She's blown up, and she shows up, and she comes on the trailer with Mark Anthony, and she's like, "What are you gonna wear?" And Joe's like, "Oh, Terrell, show her show her what we're doing." And we've done all these amazing custom leather jackets with like chinchilla trim hoods and all this amazing stuff. Very street, very Joe, but very elevated.
Mm-hmm.
And J Lo loved it. She was like, "Oh, I'm gonna change. I have a jacket like that." Her stylist like switches it up, and she, switches her whole thing up. And Joe's like, that's J Lo, and I'm like, yeah, I know. He's like, she loved it, and I'm like, yeah, I know. And so that was our relationship, because what we got to do, which I feel like doesn't really exist much today, is we got to create and build together. And Joe always came to me with tons of trust, and he was always willing to try. So that's how we were able to build a great relationship together, because Joe was always willing to try, and he always wanted to do something out of the box, even when he was a man of a certain size.
Wow. I remember, see, that's interesting you say that because, I don't know how things are now. I know they're not the same, but back then, as an A&R person, you go to all the video shoots of your artists and you the other artists on the label. And so I remember watching people like June Ambrose, for example, who worked with R. Kelly very closely back then, and some others and they bring all this stuff on, and like you said, the artists back then nobody really wanted to look like each other.
No.
Everybody wanted to have their own thing. Like she always put Robin in all these kind of crazy things, but Rob was always down to let's see what it looks like. Whereas now it feels like so many of the artists now they have to all wear like Rick Owens, and they all have to wear like certain almost like a uniform.
Yeah.
Whereas back then everybody was really trying to be their own individual self.
And we'll be right back. Ready to launch your podcast? Merrick Studios offers comprehensive services, from concept development and seamless production to strategic marketing and monetization. Let your story take the mic. Visit merrickcreative.com/studios and let's get to work.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Mink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulummink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to our show.
The people you work with now, are they still willing to try new things, or they kind of a little gun shy?
Yeah, so I definitely scaled my business back in the past, maybe like in the past 5 years. I definitely scaled it back because it's just not the same it's just nothing about anything is the same.
Nothing's the same. Nothing's
And
the
this
same.
doesn't have to do with COVID. I'm just thinking about the industry
Yeah.
in itself.
Yeah.
It's changed completely. And obviously, unfortunately, a lot of that joy for me and the creativity has definitely no longer exist.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm fortunate that I still am able to create some great things with Joe. Joe does have his own sense of style.
Absolutely.
As Khaled. And DJ Khaled I've been with, obviously that happened through Joe. So when I met,
I was going to ask you, tell us about the DJ Khaled, because I know you've worked with him forever too.
Yes, I've been with Khaled about 17 or 18 years. We also spoke this morning, so shout out to Khaled. Joe called me maybe one night about 2 a.m. and I answer the phone and he says, "Hey, are you sleeping?" I'm like, "Well, I mean, I am, but like, no." And he says, "I have somebody for you, and he's going to be a really big star, and he needs a stylist." And he puts Khaled on the phone, and Khaled's like, "Hey," he's the same Khaled that he is today. "I love what you do with Joe, and I want you to dress me, and I want you to be my stylist." And I said, "Okay, cool." And at this time, he didn't have a record deal, but he had a really big birthday party once a year, and so he said, "I'm going to fly you down and dress me for my birthday party
in Miami."
Okay, cool. And at that time, I mean, Joe is Joe, so I'm used to options, and it was one outfit. I never met him. And I was flying down to his birthday, and I did it, and I flew down to his birthday, and I dressed him. And he said to me when I was leaving, when I become famous, you're going to be my stylist. You're going to be my stylist, you're going to be my designer. And of course, I'm like, yeah, whatever. Everyone says that. And 18 years later, and I think this is now his 11th studio album.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have to say he was a man of his word.
That's beautiful, man. So wait, I wanna jump around a little bit because I was reading up and I saw you also worked with Tracy Ellis Ross and you've worked with Zoe Zaldana. So I want to talk how did those come about?
Those were editorial jobs, which were also really amazing and important to me in my career, because obviously I had jobs that were big paying jobs, but I was also at the same time trying to find balance of jobs that had some real good credibility to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I had gotten hired. Vibe magazine was actually launching a women's Vibe magazine, which was called Vibe Vixen, and Tracy Ellis Ross was going to be the face. She was on the cover of it. Shout out to Mimi Valdez. Mimi Valdez was the editor-in-chief, and this was her baby. And she said, I think that you could do something really amazing with Tracy. And that was probably one of my most challenging jobs to this day, but it was one of my most gratifying jobs because Tracy she's actually a real person of style. She's a woman who actually...
For real.
Fashion editor before. I mean, obviously, her mother is Diana Ross. So there was no stone left unturned when it came to doing something for Tracy Ellis Ross. And thank God for good mentorship and great people in your life, because again, Bevy Smith came in and she said, I think you're the man for this job, and I think you can do this some real justice. And I said, but how? She sees everything. She probably has everything. And she said, no, just do vintage. And I said, okay, cool. And Bevy introduced me to someone who actually had an amazing collection of vintage clothing, even some of Diana Ross's old clothing.
Wow.
And all of this stuff, some old stuff from Grace Jones, some old stuff, some old Patrick Kelly, some old Halston. I pulled all this vintage stuff. And I remember Tracy calling me and say, hey, so I'm traveling. I think she might have been doing Girlfriends at the time. And my goal was to bring a lot of stuff with me, but I literally am traveling and I only have one pair of my favorite jeans with me and a pair of shoes. You think we'll be okay? And I said, I think we will be okay. And I'll never forget the way she lit up when she arrived to see the rack. And she was, I want to wear it all. And it was supposed to be like maybe 2 photos, and I think we shot about 6 different outfits.
Wow.
Yeah.
So tell me, like, tell me like the science behind styling. Like if you were talking to me and I was a 14-year-old kid, 16-year-old kid, and I was I think this is what I want to do. Like, is there a science behind it? Like, how do you, like, again, I know you try to give each person their own thing. You're not like, so how do you kind of look at a Tracy Ellis? You kind of told that story, but how do you look at some of your clients and say, I think they'd be good at doing this, or they'd be good at doing that, wearing this or wearing that? Like, I know there's a math behind it. You ain't just, see, I think a lot of people think as a stylist, you're just grabbing clothes with labels on them and you just put this on. But I know you are a scientist with this. You're like a master at this craft. You've done your 10,000 hours, right? So yeah. I want you to kind of explain that so people kind of know there's more to it than just buying some hot shit at the mall.
I think the science actually is the gift, and the gift is the style. And being able to see style in everything and in everyone. I think everyone has a sense of style. I look at any and every person and I'm able to pull something from that. That's one of my reasons for still being a lover of riding the subway or sitting outside of the cafe, anywhere where I can people watch. Because for me, that's inspiration. So the kid who gets out of school, that's style. Because he's normally a little undone. His shirt might be out of his pants. His book bag is hanging off. He may have his jacket tucked in his book bag. His tie may be loose or lost. To me, that's style. It's just, where does it fit? I get that job to dress that kid in a music video or that kid in a commercial or a movie. I automatically have my canvas. I automatically have the blueprint for that particular type of style because I got that from watching a kid jump off the bus, running to his parents or hanging out with his friends, and I was able to pick up that style and store it. So I think it's just being able to see style in everything. Not only that, I think the science today that still works for me is knowing that everybody has their own individuality and finding your own individual style.
That's it.
Not everybody wear hats. Not everyone can wear glasses. Not everyone looks good in a tracksuit. Not everyone looks good in print. Certain people don't work in colors. So there are just it's basically like a scrambled puzzle,
Mm-hmm.
and every time you should be able to put that puzzle together and literally come. But the outcome should be a different picture with each try.
That's interesting.
That's my side.
Okay, yeah, that's your science. So I want to go back a little bit with Mr. Talley. Did you get to spend any time with him and talk to him about fashion, or did you just kind of see him
Yes.
in church?
My first interaction with them was me walking down Madison Avenue one day and looking in the window of Harry Winston. I don't know what I had on, but obviously my office was really close to there. And he looked at me and he said, "You look amazing." And then
Wow.
okay, I don't think I really knew who he was at that time. I knew something about him, but I don't think I connected the dots completely. The next time that I'd actually encountered him was actually at Fashion Week going to a show, and I might have had on a fur coat, and he just came over to me, tapped me on the shoulder, and said, "Can I take a picture of you?" And I said, "Yes." And he took the photo of me, and then Bevy said, "That's Andre. That's a big deal. If he wants to take a picture of you, that's a big deal." And then maybe about a week or two later, Bill Cunningham had actually serviced the picture in the New York Times, which happened to be the biggest picture in the style section, and it was me.
Wow. So for those who don't know, Bill Cunningham was a fashion photographer who would walk around this he was early. Like with the kids not doing social media, he was doing that in print. He would literally, he would kind of dress down and he would just walk around the street. And if you had some fly stuff on, he'd take a picture. And he'd take pictures of all these people. And sometimes he'd go to events and just take pictures. He was very, correct me if I'm wrong, but he was kind of very removed. He just took pictures. He wasn't like trying to be a celebrity. He was trying to take pictures.
That was a hobby job. He actually he was a hat maker. He was a millinery. So he made hats. That was his actual career. This was a hobby for him, just to capture photos. And he was just so good at it because of his innate eye and his sense of style.
Yes.
The New York Times its own section, and that's how Bill Cunningham actually became the person. But in 1 year, I think Bill Cunningham has shot me and put me in the New York Times style section 3 times.
That's crazy.
Which I heard is pretty unheard of.
Yeah, that's crazy. 1 time was crazy. 3 is amazing.
1 time, and I don't even think I brought the paper, but I don't think maybe I didn't buy it this particular day. And of course, again, we'll hear about a zillion times probably because she's just that intertwined with my life. Bevy calls me on a Monday morning in my office and says, "Did you get the newspaper?" And I said, "No." She says, "I need you to go out and get the Sunday and call me back." So I run out of my office and I get the Sunday Times and I call her back. And she says, "Now go to the style section." I go to the style section and the biggest picture on the page is me.
Wow.
"I told you." And I'm like, "Oh."
Wow. So what is your take on, you said everything's changed, everything's different now, where fashion is now and where it's going? Because again, like I said, from the outside looking in, it's become a thing. Like it was a thing, but now it's really become a thing. Like especially because of the advent of social media, like everybody wants to take pictures in their fits and everybody wants to get dressed up, and people are like, going to Paris, the rappers or whatnot are going to Paris now for the fashion shows and all that stuff, which wasn't happening a few years ago. So what's your take on where fashion is going now, and how is it affecting you as a stylist, besides the money being different? Just where do you see it going?
I won't say it's affecting me because I believe in transition, and I also believe in outgrowing things. So I'm also open to change.
Okay.
It's affected me personally as far as like the way that I used to create. But after 25 years, I think that it was just time for me to transition and to do some different things, which is what I'm working on now. And that's totally fine. I'm excited for this new generation. What I will say to them is utilize your access, not just for now, but to make a change, have some impact in it. So in my time of coming up, it wasn't really common to work hands-on with the actual designers. That wasn't really a thing. I mean, we were lucky. We very rarely could even get into the fashion houses when we were young stylists. That's why it was important for me to make my mark and hold my seat at Iceberg, because I was able to let the Sybil Pinnocks in,
Bring
the
people in.
Jules, the Eric Archibalds, the Mod Squad, any of those great, amazing stylists. I was able to actually open the door for them to give them access to come in and do what they needed to do, because they weren't really offered the resources as easily as everyone else. And you weren't really given access to a showroom unless you were doing a high end editorial. So if it wasn't your Vogue, your Bazaar, your In Style, I will say Vibe magazine, if it wasn't one of those publications, you weren't really granted the key to get a showroom. So now you actually can get in. You can get in easy, and not only can you get in, you can work hand in hand with the designer or the creative director of the house. So for me, I'm saying utilize that. Utilize it, because I actually do. So now when Dolce Gabbana or someone wants to work with me, I work directly with Dolce, and I tell them exactly what I want to see for my client, because no one knows my client better than I do. So I say, this is what looks good on Khaled, and I want to source the fabrics, and I want to tell you the silhouettes, and I want to work with you. And it is a partnership, which is a beautiful thing, but it's an access, it's an opportunity that didn't always exist. So I hold great pride when I actually do have those opportunities to really create, because again, I do believe that we shape the culture. We shape the culture. And one of my exiting positions at Iceberg was basically sort of kind of like collection approval. So what I would do was I would shop here in New York City or anywhere that I wanted to shop, and I would travel with a bunch of clothes over to Italy to actually give them what was hot.
Wow.
Basically share what was moving the needle culturally in the States, because these designers at that time, they weren't coming to the US. So I realized at that moment a shift had happened, because remember, I don't know if you know, but I used to look to Italy, to Europe, to Paris, all those to basically, that's where I thought that I would feed from. But once I realized how important and powerful my culture was, and how we were shaping it, and how we were actually driving that train, I realized, oh, there's a lot of power in this. Because it's just our personal innate style. It's not really creating anything. It's what you do with what's already created. So I say take advantage of all the opportunity that they have today. Work very closely with the designers. Not only use your style, use your voice.
So let me ask you, I already know your answer, but I'm going to ask you, so seeing two Harlemites, younger Harlemites, killing it, A$AP Rocky, Tiana Taylor, right? These are two born and bred Harlemites that came up through it, and now are like at pinnacles in the fashion world, as well as other things they're doing with acting and stuff like that. But have you had a lot of interaction with them, and have you kind of helped guide them along the way, or get a chance to talk to them about what they're doing?
I haven't had to guide them, because they're bred from the same blueprint as they actually have it. They have an idea. Honestly, I think that they're actually today's blueprint for how people should actually conduct themselves in a room full of style, because
break that down.
I think that they have their own style, and I think that they're style leaders, and I think that what they do is they take their style over to Europe, and they allow Europe to feed off of what they deliver, what they bring to the table. Because Tiana is that girl who's very diverse in her style. She can do anything from Adidas tracksuit with some great construction boots, or a head to toe Rick Owens look. What I think Tiana's power is bringing it all to life. She can wear anything. Why? Because she's Tiana. Also, why? Because she's from Harlem, and Harlem has a very special relationship with style. I mean, Tiana's birthed from like a very stylish mother. I'm sure A$AP comes from a bunch of style, and his uncles, everyone has great style in his family. So they actually have the ownership. They actually own their own style, which is why they're able to then go and bring other people's vision and style to life. So they're like the modern mannequins, but they actually come with style.
That's actually a good phrase. You need to trademark that. Modern mannequins is dope. That was dope. Now you also design.
Yes.
So talk about how you got into that and what you've done with that.
So I have tons of respect and admiration for actual designers by trade, and I love and respect them so much because it's just such a gift. I was led to design. I was forced to design because my resources were so limited. So what I would do is I would actually go take myself down to the garment industry and district rather, and I learned to source fabrics myself. I taught myself how to source fabrics, how to source zippers, how to create buttons, lining, and anything that you could think of from A to Z. Any tool that I would need to create something for something, not just something special for my clients. So I am a creator because I give a designer their credit, and I don't want to ever sit in the seat of I'm a designer and they've gone to school and they've studied and there's a whole uh, guide and history to what they do and a magic. I create. So what I do is I have an idea in my mind, and what my job is to then bring it to life. And how I bring it to life, I bring it to life through design. So once I source fabrics, I play with sketches or work with the sketch artist and take everything that's in my head and I have them bring that to paper. So they put pen to paper and they bring that together for me. And then I take that and I go sit with a tailor or a master seamstress and someone who actually can obviously, again, take what was in my head, which is now transferred to this paper, which will now be transferred to actual garments, which then become my designs.
Would you suggest that be I was gonna say path, but not the right term, a skill that like somebody young trying to get into it should kind of have? I mean, maybe they're not naturally gifted like you, but this it's almost like just kind of knowing how to do it, even if they don't become actual designers, is kind of knowing the process of it.
I encourage them to just learn the basics of it. Being able to have a conversation about fabric, being able to source, being able to understand the difference and the teeth and zippers, being able to understand what you can do with the button and how, just basically expanding your resources. It's really just creating what doesn't exist. That's that I thrive off of. A lot of my ideas, a lot of my designs, I dream about them. So God gives them to me in a dream. However it works, in my dream, I could see someone or be watching something on TV. But what locks in with me is what someone has on. And then I wake up and I write it down, or I wake up and when I start my day, I say, "Oh, okay, I had a dream about this multicolor whatever jacket. I'm gonna go create that." And so that leads me down then to source fabrics. And once I source those fabrics, I then take that idea that I dreamt about and I say, I want to see how I play with it. And I do it. And that's what happens. And then at that point I have something that I've designed. It's literally a one of a kind because it doesn't exist anywhere. I only saw it in my dream, but it wasn't in reality. So I bring it to reality.
Okay. So tell me what's going on with you now and what's next.
So what's going on with me now? I don't know. The universe. What's going on with me now is I'm still unfolding and unlocking gifts. I was interested in purchase. I'll tell you a quick story. I was interested in purchasing some black art. So I'd been connecting with a lot of black artists on Instagram throughout the pandemic and just locking into stuff. As you see, like Kahinde Wiley is on my wall, and those are his plates, and I love Kahinde.
He's
And he's
amazing.
a great guy, and I love him. So I've been wanting to have some black art in my life, in my space, and in my world. And so I found this amazing artist on Instagram named Robert Patterson. And I reached out to him and I said, I love your work and I would love to, look at it. And I definitely love it. And so he said he saw me on he saw Fat Joe talking about me, or maybe Fat Joe had posted me. And I said, one day I wanna definitely talk to you about purchasing a piece of your art. And he responded and said, oh, that's amazing. You have a great style. You're actually art. And I'm like, thank you, And he said, you should let me paint you. And I said, okay, cool, whatever. And he calls me and he said, I have a photographer. It's in New York City. And I want her to shoot you. And I have one request. Just don't wear any plaids or any crazy patterns because it can be very hard with the strokes. And I said, okay, it's totally fine. And I met this woman. She took some photos of me. She sends them off to Robert. And a year later, fast forward to last week, Robert says, hey, I have this exhibit and it's going to take place in New York City. And your photo is the last photo that I'm working on. Your painting is the last painting. And then it's going to be picked up and it's shipped into New York City. Are you available for the opening of my exhibit? And I said, absolutely, I'm going to come, whatever. And that day happens last Thursday. And Robert calls me and he says, and I'm trying to buy art. That's all that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Robert calls me and he says, hey, what's up, man? I'm like, hey, what's up? He's like, you on for tonight? I'm like, yeah. He says, so I have good news and I have bad news. And I'm like, okay. And he says, so the good news is everyone loves your painting. The bad news is it just sold to a museum.
What?
And I said, what do you mean? And that's what I said. And he said,
that's not bad news.
I guess it was,
but I know what you're saying.
He knew I wanted to buy it.
Yeah.
So this painting that I go see, it's now has a permanent home of me in the Wichita Arts Museum, and it'll be there for like the next in 100 years. Anyone can go see it, obviously. And so that's how my life is unfolding. I'm working on some film and television, and I'm also bringing my life. So if you ask me how it's unfolding with me removing myself from behind the camera and coming in front of the camera.
Yeah.
And i.e. to why I was so open to doing this interview, not because you're also my friend and I think you're amazing and I love this platform that you've built, but also coming to the forefront a little bit and just sharing my life. So obviously now I'm going to exist someplace in the art world forever. And I want to create a television show. I'm actually working with someone trying to create a television show loosely based on like my life and how my life actually works. Because I still am trying to grasp how it works, right? Like you asked me how Iceberg, and it's through a newspaper, and then it unfolds into all these twists and turns. And then fast forward, how do I wind up in the Wichita Arts Museum just from a photo from a person that I never met? I didn't meet the artist until last week in person. Remember, he just sketched.
On social media. Yeah.
And he said, your art. And then now I'm in a museum. I'll be in a museum for the rest of, just throughout life. That'll be the home of a painting of me. So I think that's what my life is. That's what I'm doing with my life in the future.
Amazing. I got two more questions.
Whatever you need.
I should have asked this earlier, but anyway, how has social media changed fashion, in your opinion?
I think the way that social media has changed fashion is it's sort of kind of oversaturated it. Fashion Week was a very special, that was like a holiday for us, right? Because it was sort of kind of like an unveiling. You didn't get to see anything before, and obviously you don't really even get to see anything after. You didn't really see anything until it actually hit the stores or was in a publication, was in some kind of editorial for a shoot. And then you weren't reintroduced to it, or you actually weren't really introduced to it until it actually hit the stores. Now, it's so accessible. You can click, you can watch anything and everything. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it's, but I definitely think it definitely decreased the magic.
Lost the mystique.
It lost that mystique. I like mystique. I like mysteria. I like surprise. I like unveiling. I like the idea of the unexpected. You don't know what you're going to see. Now there's just a lead up, anything. Like you can just share it with the world. And it's just like, and for me, things get old to me as a creative. Things get old very quickly to me. So once I've seen something ran through social media for the past month, I don't know that it moves me when I see it in person. I don't know that I have that same, same attraction to it because I've seen it. I've seen it over and over and over. I've seen it all over the place. So it's not really special to me at that moment. So I think it's just taking away some of the magic for me.
Okay. Second thing, and I ask this of everybody, again, without incriminating anybody. And if you can't think of anything, you can't say it's fine. Give me one crazy story about working in fashion and da-da-da. But I don't want to get nobody in trouble. I don't want to get nobody, but just give me a crazy story. And you don't have to even mention the person who it was, but just give me a crazy story behind the scenes, whatever.
That's a real question. Because I have a few of them. Okay, so I got T-Pain as a client. Randomly, he no longer wanted to wear the big hats anymore. And so they call me and they say, hey, so T-Pain is looking for a new person, and can you have a meeting in Miami with his management? I'm like, yes. They said, he wants to look regular. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? He wants to look regular. Yeah, I said, so he doesn't want to wear big hats? He doesn't want to wear big hats anymore. He wants to look regular. So I said, okay, cool. And I get this job with Payne, and he says to me, is there any way possible you could make a wooden jacket? And I'm like, a wooden jacket? And I said, wait, so you mean like a jacket made out of wood? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't think that that's possible, but let me see what I can do. Let me figure something out for you. And Payne is, if you know Payne, he's extremely
very. He's a gifted. He's gifted. He's gifted. He's a super talented guy.
And so I said, I can't do a wooden jacket, but I commissioned this artist who's amazing at airbrushing and sort of kind of has this 3D, three-dimensional sort of kind of thing. And I said, I just need you to make this leather. I want a leather jacket, but then I want you to airbrush it and basically give it the appearance of a wooden shellac floor. And he does it. And I present it to Payne, and Payne is like, you can fucking do anything.
You did it.
Can you make me a glass jacket? I said, that I can't do. I glass jacket, but I'm glad that I was able to make your dreams of having a wooden jacket at least appear to be wooden, because it was for a photo shoot. And it looked like it was made of wood.
That's amazing.
I've never had a request like that before.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time, brother. We could do this for 5 hours. I really had, this was fun.
Man, it's amazing. Thank you so much.
Amazing. You can catch Mixed and Mastered on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hit that follow button, leave a review, and tell a friend. I'm your host, Jeffrey Sledge. Mixed and Mastered is produced and distributed by Merrick Studios.